Now we are going to look at each type of research works in isolation. First, let's start with the quantitative approaches or the quantitative type of research works. Here, as we said before, in the quantitative research work, we want to explain a certain phenomena, and we collect and we analyze data related to that phenomena or related to that occurrence. Okay? And when we collect the data, we have to collect numerical data. Look at the first point. It specifies that we have to collect and analyze numerical data, data that depends on numbers, as we mentioned before. Here, when we compare the numbers, the pre-numbers to the post-numbers, as I gave you an example before, there is a difference between the pre and the post ones. Okay, we notice all the time or most of the time that there is a difference. Okay, so this difference is the amount of change that occurs or that happens according to the change that we presented or according to the variables that we manipulated. Okay, and I'm going to explain the word variable and manipulate in just a few seconds, but just follow me. Okay, so the amount of a change between the numbers, the pre-numbers and the post-numbers, or the pre-results and the post-results, is called a difference, and this difference shows how the sample was changed according to the change of the variables. Okay, it tells us that there is a difference and that there is a change, but it doesn't mention the reasons of that change. Why did that change happen? It doesn't say that. It doesn't give us a list of logical reasons for that occurrence. Okay, where do we get these reasons? We try to analyze the results as much as we can as research workers, and we suggest reasons for that change. Then other research works would come and take each reason and analyze it in detail and carry out a research work about it to make sure that it is really the reason for the change. Okay, so here the research works suggest the difference only, but the reasons for that change is just a suggestion by the research worker that are going to be investigated later on by the use of other research works. Okay, so the data again is numerical and it is analyzed using different statistical methods, and you are going to study that in detail in relation to the course of statistics. Okay, in the quantitative approaches, we have what we call a number of variables. What are the variables? The variables are factors that we have to keep the same, or we have to keep constant, or that we have to fully control. So in any quantitative approach, we have a number of variables, and we are going to explain that in detail, inshallah, when we talk about the scientific method and the quasi-experimental method. Okay, so the variables, all the variables of the research work should be put under full control, except for one, and we have to put that in mind, and we have to be very careful about it in order to be able to eliminate any interference and measure the effect of the factor that we changed. Okay, so in any research work, again, there is a number of factors. Okay, we keep all these factors the same and we change only one. Why do we do that? In order to be able to discover or to find out whether the change occurring, the change that is shown by the difference, whether this change occurring is the result of the one element that we kept not under control or not. Okay, so here in any quantitative research work, we control all the elements or control all the variables, and we keep only one of them free. Okay, what else? We have to be very careful about our samples. What is the sample? The sample is the group of people that we are going to work with, or the group of objects that we are going to analyze, or the group of animals that we are going to focus on, or the group of plants that we are going to experiment with. Okay, this sample should be randomized, should be chosen without a certain order. Okay, we take different members from the whole society in a random way. Okay, why do we choose it randomly? In order not to make it subjective. Okay, what is the meaning of subjective? It means that the results are changed or colored according to the preference of the research worker. How can we control that, and how can we make our research work objective, free of any bias? By randomization, when we choose the members of the sample randomly without any intention, okay, or without any intentionally focused choice. Okay, if the research work is not going to focus on numbers, so it means that it's not quantitative. Okay, and of course, again, according to the nature of your research work, you are going to choose the method. So there are certain research works that need to be quantitative, and there are other research works that cannot be quantitative. Now let's talk about the quantitative data. What are the sources that we collect the data from? If we want to collect data for the quantitative study, which means that we are going to collect numerical data, we might have a number of sources. The first source is the surveys. And a survey, what do we mean by a survey? A survey is the collection of information from a large group of people that are located in a certain community or in a certain area. And in the surveys, we take the responses of a number of people to a certain questionnaire or something like that, and we analyze the responses they give. And here, if you look at the first point, it says that surveys where there are a large number of respondents, especially where you have used a Likert scale. What do we mean by a Likert scale? It means that we are giving them a number of variations of choices that is referred to by numbers. Okay, for example, we have the statement or the question, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they choose a number which represents their viewpoint. Okay, in this case we use the surveys and we analyze the results given by the respondents, and we consider that a source of data for the quantitative studies. Also, we can depend on the observations, the direct observation of any performance or of people working or doing a certain thing or showing a certain skill, and we count the numbers of the people and we code this data according to the numbers. Okay, so this is another source of data for that study. Or if we use secondary data like government data or SATS scores or any scores of any of the tests that we have, or any of the governmental data about a certain occurrence or a certain phenomenon. The last one is the results of tests or measures related to a certain factor. So these are the sources that we can use in order to collect the data suitable for the quantitative type of studies. Okay, when we analyze this data, we use certain techniques. What are the suitable analysis techniques? We can use the verification of hypotheses or testing of hypotheses, and we are going to give a full explanation of that later on when we talk about them, inshallah. We can also use correlation. Correlation means showing the relationship between two factors or between two elements. Or cluster analysis, when we analyze a group of things or a group of people in relation to a certain phenomenon or to a certain feature. When we analyze the quantitative data, When we come to the point of analyzing the quantitative data, we will find that we have to consider a number of ideas. The first one, it says here, always good to group and or visualize the data initially. So when we compare the results of the students or the results of people, or when we look at the analysis of a questionnaire or whatever, we do not compare individuals, we compare groups. So it's a good idea when you are doing a quantitative research work to put the marks, or to put the grades that you get, or the numbers you have, in groups, and you have a logic for the division of these groups, or you put them into categories, and you have a certain logic for the division of this categorization. Okay, it is also a very good idea to visualize the data that you get, to change it into a visual form. What are the visual forms that we can use? We can use a bar chart, we can use a pie chart, we can use lines to show the relationship between factors, and so on. Because the results of the quantitative data should be easy to understand, depending on the graphs or depending on the visual representation given. Okay, also you have to consider, if you are going to group the individuals into groups or into categories, what is the average that you want to look at? Of course, when we put them into groups, each group should have a certain average that we can compare to the average of the other group. What's the average that you would use? Are you going to use the mean score, or the median, or the mode, or whatever? This differs according to the purpose of your research work, and this is going to be discussed in detail in the statistics course given to you by the other professors. Okay, the last point, I think it's a little bit advanced, and you don't need to look at that, because this will give you a hard time and you will not be able to understand it now. So just leave this. What else should we look at, or what else should we put into consideration? The title here says, what are you looking for? When we look at the results of the quantitative research work, we are trying to find patterns or signals from the huge amount of data that we have. So we are searching for a signal, or we are searching for a certain part that shows that there has been a change, or that there is a difference between the initial stage, or the initial standard, and the last standard. And also we need to discover whether there is a correlation between factors, or they are not related in any form. So we need to find a signal, and to be able to signify it from the noise. We also have to be able to find the difference between or within the groups, or to find the correlation between factors. Also, we can use, if we are using quantitative research work, we can use parametric or non-parametric measures. The parametric measures are used if the sample is more than 30 people or 30 objects. Okay, so if your sample includes more than 30 items, you are going to use parametric measures, and if they are less than that, just one person or one thing up to 29, you are going to use non-parametric measures. And this is again going to be explained in detail in the statistics course. Okay. Be very careful. Again, let me repeat that again, that the difference that we discover, or the correlation that we discover, will not tell us why, will not tell us about the causes for that change or for that relationship. The causes have to be investigated further, or some of the reasons or some of the causes might be suggested by the researcher, but it needs a number of other research works to be found out and made obvious for the other researchers or for the community. What are the problems that we might face if we are doing a quantitative research work, or what are the issues that we care about or we worry about when we use quantitative research works? The first thing about the sample, we said that the sample has to be random, okay, and then we said that the sample can be can include very few number of subjects, or it can include a larger number of subjects. And here you use parametric or non-parametric as we said before, but you have to ask yourself, is the sample big enough for my research work? Am I using the right or the correct amount of objects or the correct amount of people to be able to test my hypotheses or to deal with the topic that I'm concerned with? This is a question that you have to ask yourself, and this is one of the problems that we face, whether the size of the sample is suitable or not. What else? Of course, we depend on the statistical analysis, and the type of test that you use depends on you or depends on your choice. So you have to ask yourself that question: am I using the correct statistical test, or I'm using something which is not suitable for my research work? And that's why you are studying the course of statistics, in order to understand what they mean and how they are used and the reasons for using each one of them, so you would be able to choose the suitable test for your topic. Okay, also here the other question: have I reduced the likelihood of making type 1 and or type 2 errors? Am I using, or am I committing a number of errors that might lead to bad assumptions or incorrect results, or that would lead to my inability to generalize my work? Okay, so here this is a question that you have to ask yourself. Also, is my results generalizable, or I'm going to be facing a problem with that? Did I deal with all the factors that will make my results suitable to be applied in other societies, or my sample is limited to the community I'm working with and has a number of factors affecting it that might not be found in other situations or in other societies, and here I'll not be able to generalize that. I have to ask myself that question, and I have to worry about it, because if it's generalizable, you are going to take your results and just announce it to the whole world and say that this can be implemented throughout all the countries. But if it's not, you have to mention the conditions under which you can use these results, or you can depend on them. Okay, again, you have to ask yourself the next question: are my results or methods or results reproducible? It means that if somebody else use the same methods, are they going to be able to get the same results? Are they stable enough, or they are going to change according to the change of the society? This is a very important point, because if your results are going to be changed, so they cannot be generalized. Okay, if people can take the same methods and apply them and get the same results or nearby results, it means that your results are trustworthy and they can be generalized. So this is a question that you have to ask yourself. Also, you have to ask yourself whether you are measuring things in the right way or not. If you want to measure a change in something and you are using a certain test or a certain measure or a questionnaire or a survey or whatever, is that tool suitable for your purpose, or you're using the wrong tool? This is a question that you have to ask yourself, and this is a problem that you might face when you are carrying out a quantitative research work. So what are the things that are considered wrong, or what are the drawbacks, or what are the disadvantages of the quantitative research work. There are certain ideas and certain factors and certain aspects that can never be measured accurately. So measuring it again and again and again will lead to nothing, will lead to many mistakes. So there are things, or there are features or ideas that are beyond measuring. Okay? Again, another problem with the quantitative research is that it doesn't show us, or it doesn't tell us about the reasons for the occurrence of something, or the reasons for a certain phenomenon. It just analyzes the phenomenon and mentions a few aspects about it, but it doesn't tell us why. Why is the effort of the researcher himself, and as I said before, needs to be investigated further. Also, because it's highly practical and because it's highly controllable, it's impersonal. Okay, so here we cannot concentrate on the human behavior or the specific behavior of the individuals. It is totally not related to the behaviors, or not related to the factors that cannot be measured very specifically. Okay. Another point is that the data can be static, not dynamic. It means that we are looking at the data at a certain point of time and not considering the development or the change in that data over time. Okay. Also, it can tell us a version of the truth, or it can tell us a lie, but not totally the truth. It doesn't tell us about all the aspects of the truth, just one aspect, and we cannot depend on it to have a full image about the thing. Okay, because the statistics might lead us in a certain way that might not be totally correct, or that might not be totally convincing. Okay. So sometimes this is one of the drawbacks of it. And the last point occurs especially if the researcher is not selecting the suitable methods to analyze the data, and the numbers can take him to a way which is not related to the truth in any aspect or in any way. Now we will talk about the qualitative research works, or the qualitative approaches. And as we said, the qualitative approach or methods of investigation depend mainly on the verbal data, on the words and on the recordings or the field notes, the generalizations, photos, videos, pictures, people's own talks, and so on. So this is what we mean by qualitative research work. It's a research work that doesn't depend on numbers at all, and doesn't depend on the statistical analysis of anything. The numbers they use are just percentages or frequencies. Okay, percentages of people doing something, frequencies of the occurrence of a certain aspect, and things like that. Okay, so here the qualitative approaches start with a broad question. They have a question, the problem is formed in the shape of a question, and this question is the basic one, and the researcher tries to collect a lot of data in order to try to find an answer for that question. It doesn't need hypotheses, and we are going to talk about the hypotheses later on, inshallah. It doesn't need hypotheses. It doesn't start by them. It starts by a big question, and then we have all the answers written by the researcher himself, and then at the end of it we might have a hypothesis sometimes. Okay, so the qualitative approaches start with the starts with the ideas or with the data, and then from the data we come up with a theory, not the other way around. Remember when we were talking about the theory and the data? Okay, the qualitative research work starts with the data first, and then we come up with the theory at the end. So it is inductive. We take the data, we analyze it, we put it together, we find patterns, we discuss it, we try to come up with a certain result connecting that data together, and this way of connecting the data is our own theory. So it goes in that way, and it is not deductive. It cannot start from a theory and then it tries to verify or falsify it. It's the opposite of the quantitative research works. Okay, so these are the general features of what we call qualitative approaches. When we gather the data that we need for a qualitative research work, we are trying to find the answer for two very important questions. How did this happen and why did it happen? So here we are trying to answer the two important questions, how and why. And this is not found in the quantitative ones. Remember when we said in the quantitative research works, the focus is on the change, whether there is a change or not, whether there is an advance or not, but they do not talk about the how or the why. The how and the why is answered by the qualitative research works. Okay, so here we don't need a very large sample. The sample can be just one person, okay, and it would be enough. We do not need a large sample, and we do not need a random sample. We are choosing the sample deliberately because we want to describe that person, or we want to describe that community or that change. Okay, so the sample here is not randomized. We do not try to choose it from the whole society that we are dealing with. We deliberately or purposefully choose a certain group of people or a group of things, and we start to look at them and collect data about them. So here the size of the sample is not an issue. We can use only one person, as I said, or one thing, or we can use hundreds or thousands. It depends on the purpose of our research work. Okay, here, because we sometimes use a large number of people or thousands of people, or we can depend on just one person, so the responses of these people or of the sample is very important. If we are focusing on the viewpoint of people, if they say something wrong or something not correct or lying, this will lead our research work into a road which is not correct, because we are depending on false information. Okay, some people also, because we are depending on them, might say what we want to hear or what they think we want to hear, and this again will make the research work come up with the results that are not correct or that do not go with the reality in the correct manner. Okay, there is also an ethical issue here. What's the ethical issue that we might face? Because the researcher is analyzing the words and analyzing facts about a number of people or a number of occurrences, so he's going to stay with these people, or he's going to be around that occurrence for a very long time. They will take a large amount of time being together, and this will lead to creating a certain type of a relationship with the people or with the occurrence. And here the researcher is not going to be subjective totally, because he is related in a certain way, and he's going to be somehow objective. Okay, he's not going to be objective at all. He's going to be subjective, or it's very difficult for him to detach himself from the description of the occurrence or of the people. So here the results of the qualitative research works are somehow objective. They are not they are somehow subjective. I'm mixing it up, معلش يا شباب. The results are subjective because the effect of the preferences of the research worker is there. His own way of looking at things is there, so it is very hard to say that these types of research works are objective. They are totally subjective. The part that we are going to talk about now is the sources of the qualitative data. Remember when we mentioned the sources of the quantitative data, we had 4 main sources. Here we have more than that, and some of the sources that you have in front of you now, you will remember that they were also used for the quantitative research work. So there are sources that can be used for both types of research works, but there are other sources that are specified or that are closely related to only one of them. Here, the sources that we can draw the data from are, as you can see, the first one is the interviews. Either the interview is a structured one, semi-structured, or unstructured, and we are going to talk about them in detail when we talk about the descriptive research work, inshallah. The second one is the focus group, and the focus group is going to be tackled also when we talk about different types of research works. The third one, questionnaires, and you are familiar with that, or the surveys that we mentioned with the quantitative ones. Also, it can be one of the sources can be the secondary data, including the diaries or the reports given by different people, the written accounts of the past events, archive data, or reports coming from different institutions. Also, another source of data is the direct observation carried out by the researcher himself or a group of people cooperating with him. And these observations can be recorded either orally as an audio, or they can be recorded orally and visually as a video. The last source is the ethnography, and the ethnography is the study of the human beings and their development. Okay, so these are the sources of qualitative data that can be used for qualitative studies. When we analyze the qualitative data, we might use one of these types of analyses. Okay, I'm not going to explain each one specifically or in a lot of detail because we don't need to do that. You will gain more information about it next year, inshallah, when you join the special diploma, and the following year, inshallah, when you are in the pre-masters year. Okay, so the types of analysis that we can use, that can be used for the qualitative research works, are the content analysis that we carry out according to the objectives, the grounded analysis in which we have a certain theory and we analyze according to that, the social network analysis, which can also be used for the quantitative research work, the discourse analysis, and this depends on the analysis of the words and the phrases, the narrative analysis, when we have a narration given by somebody and we analyze it, conversation analysis, if there is a certain dialogue or a conversation between people and we analyze it, we call it conversation analysis. So all of these are types of analyses that we can use for different types of qualitative research works, and we choose the one suitable for our own situation and the topic that we are dealing with. Here we have an example of the qualitative data research. You can read that yourself, and you can try to understand it. If you face any problem with that, please ask me. We are not going to waste any time trying to explain that because it's self-explanatory. Okay, so this is the topic that is dealt with, and here it clarifies the data sources that were used for that research work. what are the problems or what are the things that we worry about if we are carrying out a qualitative research work? The first problem is that the coding problem. The coding problem is a big problem because we know here that we are not analyzing numbers and we are not using statistical analysis. So here we have to code the data and categorize it and then try to find some kind of pattern in these categorizations and try to give an explanation depending on that order or depending on the patterns that we discover. So if you code your data wrongly, it means that you are going to be wrongly directed to some results that are not related to the reality. Okay, the second one, whether you or the researcher managed to capture the situation in a realistic manner, because you know that the viewpoint of people differ and how we see different events or different situations might change according to our own way of looking at things or according to our viewpoint. So what I see is not similar to what you see. You see the event or you see the incident according to your own preference or according to your own vision of the things, and I'll have a different way of looking at it because I'm colored by my own beliefs and the way I prefer to look at things. Okay, for example, let me give you an example here. If we see somebody, a man for example, hitting a little boy, okay, some people will say that this is an aggressive attitude and that this man is really not humane and that he's hurting the young boy and this is very bad, and will try to save the boy because the man is dealing with him in a way which is not proper. Okay, another person might say that this man is trying to teach that boy a lesson, and he is trying to forbid him from doing something wrong, and he's punishing him in order to manage his behavior or to teach him a lesson in life. Somebody else might say that this is a good thing and this is a good father and or a good adult who is trying to make the boy follow his orders or learn to respect all people. So these are different ways of looking at one situation, and of course nobody can say that any of them is wrong or any of them is right till you go and ask that person about the reality and what's really happening there. So sometimes the research workers are deceived by what they see because of their own perspective or their own way of thinking about things. Okay, the third point is the amount of detail. Whether the research worker provided the sufficient amount of detail describing the occurrence or the event or the situation he's dealing with, or does it need further explanation or further description. This is something that might be problematic because the amount of detail needed differ from one person to another. Someone might say that 2 paragraphs describing the details of the situation is enough, but others might say that we need further points or further explanation of how things were managed and how they were put together and things like that. So the amount of detail needed differ from one person to another, and this is a problem. The following one is the idea of being objective versus being subjective. And here the question says, have I managed to see the world through the eyes of my participants? Because here, when you use qualitative research work, you are not required to only represent your own perspective. You have to present the perspective of the participants or of the sample. So were you objective enough to present their viewpoint without coloring that by your own point of view? Or are you subjecting your own way of looking at things, and you are indulging yourself as a person or as a researcher and changing what they might say or what they might think about the situation? The last one, is my approach flexible and able to change? If there is something which was not proved right, can you change your approach, and can you manipulate it a little bit to make it suitable for the changes? This is one of the problems of the qualitative research works. Here, what are the drawbacks of using a qualitative research work? The first one, subjectivity. It can be very subjective. You cannot be 100% objective, and this is a great problem, because here it means that it represents your viewpoint and your viewpoint alone, and your viewpoint might not be the reality. The second one, it can't always be repeated. You cannot repeat it all the time. Why? Because it focuses on you as a researcher, and you are not going to be the example they are going to follow if they repeat the research work. Number 3, it can't always be generalizable. It is very difficult. It is nearly impossible to generalize the results of a qualitative research work. Why? Because it is describing a group of people in a certain community, in a certain society, that have certain conditions and certain circumstances changing their behavior and changing their way of thinking and affecting them. So you can never take the results of one research work and generalize it to another society or to the world, because it is totally specific to a group of people in a certain society. Okay? It cannot always give you definite answers in the way that quantitative research can. You do not have specific answers for your question. You have suggestions about the answers, but not a specific answer, because there is nothing definite and something touchable like the numbers here. It depends on the way you analyze things, and this might not be totally clear and totally definite and can be easily touched. Okay? The last one, it can be easier to carry out or hide bad or poor quality qualitative research than bad quantitative research. So if you are doing or carrying out a research work which is not that good, it is easy for you to hide the bad quality of your qualitative research, but it's not easy to cover or to hide the bad quality or the bad nature of your quantitative research, because numbers cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled, cannot be directed in a certain way. You can deceive by using words, but you cannot deceive by numbers. There are other aspects, of course, that we have to put in mind when we carry out a research work. Things like validity, reliability, trustworthiness, and things like that. All of that is going to be explained later in that course or in other courses, so I don't want you to exert a lot of effort thinking about that now. As a summary, let's read that together. The type of approach you choose will be determined by your research question, your epistemological and ontological stances, and your skills or ability to utilize a certain approach. For most people in education, a mixed method approach will be used, and this is us. So long as you make an informed choice and can justify it, it should be fine. So it depends on your choice and your ability to find a logical explanation for that. The last thing, just be aware of the limitations of your approach and try to compensate where it's necessary. I hope this is clear, and I wish you a very good time. And please, if you have any problems with the presentation or with the explanation, don't hesitate to ask any questions that come to your mind. I'm waiting for your responses starting tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you very much for that. See you later.